Well, lads, it's that time of the year where the FGO taxman comes around and says, hey, you got some of that nice Christmas money. Would be a real shame if we dropped a GSSR for about, like, what, roughly $15 USD, something around there. And you're going to want to get that because it's a good deal. I mean, $15 for a guaranteed SSR is ridiculous when you consider that normally a quote-unquote guaranteed SSR is like 900 cent quartz, right? Which, let's not even get into how much money that is, but it's ridiculous. It's a really good deal. The problem is that every year the GSSRs are like super whack. Now, the next one we should be getting, I believe, for the 7th anniversary is where it actually starts to get really good. They're on the right track with this one. As you'll see, they're grouped by their card type. So in theory, what they're going for is that, say you're like, oh, I really need a quick, single target unit, where it's like, well, not all of these guys are quick single targets, but hey, you can get 3 of them. In worst case scenario, you could at least walk away with, say, Okita Alter or Say, so you got a quick unit, right? You're at least kind of getting something. In the future, if you don't know what I'm talking about, they'll essentially group it in a way of like, okay, these are all night class single target arts units, or these are all night class AoE buster units, right? Like something along those lines. So it's really like you're gonna get someone that's filling the role you're going for. This kind of does it, but they're not quite there yet. They don't quite have the godsend GSSRs that we're going to be getting in the future, but these are still good. But one of the things you'll notice is a lot of these GSSRs are chocked full of units, which can either be a good thing or a bad thing depending on your mindset. And I'm gonna try to help you guys out in thinking about what GSSR you wanna go for. Now, if by the end of this video you still haven't come to a good conclusion, because I really can't give you specific advice for your box, what I can tell you to do is that we have our Discord down in the description down below. You can ask myself or other people that are in there. We have a large FGO community in there, and you can be like, okay, I listened to the advice, I've narrowed it down to maybe like these 2 GSSRs right here, which one should I go for? Or, I'm trying to stream every single weekday, but I at least stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can always ask me on stream. Even if I'm streaming something like Arc Nights or something along those lines, I'll still answer your FGO questions. So don't be afraid to ask there, because what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to help you narrow down your choices. I'll go over some of the better GSSRs, obviously, and be like, oh, these are the ones that I think are really strong. But even if I'm like, oh, support 1 is absolutely crazy, if you've got all of these guys, that advice does not help you. So you might be looking at a different banner to go for. And one of the things that you do want to have in mind when you're looking at some of these GSSRs is don't be like, oh, Koyenskaya is right there, or Oberon is right there, and your eyes just, pop out of your head. You're like, I gotta go for that one. And if you're gonna do that, you can't be like super locked into just getting Koyenskaya or Oberon, because if you do not get them, which odds say 1 in 5, 1 in 7, you probably are not going to get them. How you need to think about it is, okay, I really want Oberon, but if I don't get Oberon, am I happy with my other choices? And you're like, well, I would like to get Jalter, but let's say you don't care about Ruler Artoria. I know, unfathomable. Who wouldn't like Ruler Artoria? But there are some crazy people that think she's mid, and I'm not one of them. I'm a day 1 supporter. But regardless, you're like, oh, I don't want her, or you don't want Okita Alter, you don't want Summer Abbey, which is a bit more understandable. If you're not happy with getting any of them, or really you already got Jalter and you don't want any of the other 4, then maybe it might be better to be like, well, I'll go for the Koyenskaya one because I don't have either, and I'll be happy with getting Koyenskaya, but if I don't get her, I can get Arjuna Alter, who I'm very happy with getting. Maybe you're also like, Raiko becomes stupid dummy good after her buff that she just got recently on JP. I'll also be happy with that. And then maybe you're like, I know Cleopatra's not the craziest servant, but I like the Danganronpa art style, so I'd be really happy to get her. Same thing for Iskandar. Maybe you're understanding that he's not the craziest servant, but you just really liked Phase Zero and you're content with getting him. He's somebody you want on your account. Then you could also just look at the GSSR as a whole and try to find one that is going to net you the best average. That's kind of what I'm advising you to go for. If you're, looking at, say, Space Ishtar, and you really, really want Space Ishtar, are you going to be happy with getting the other units? Because you don't want to set yourself up to being disappointed, because I've seen so many people do these GSSRs where they're like, oh, dude, I'm really going all in on this one just to get, I don't know, Melusine, and then they get, Benny Enma, and they're super sad, and it's like, oh, dude, you just gotta set yourself up. You gotta make sure you're going for one that's not gonna leave you disappointed. For instance, I'm going for this one more than likely because I really want Summer Jean, but I'm also completely content with getting pretty much any of the other people. Even though I have Melusine, NP2 I'm fine with. It's the same reason I put the Summer Ibuki on the Destiny Order summon, which we'll talk about that when it comes to NA, so don't worry about it. But essentially, I put her on there, even though I already had her, because I would be content with getting NP2 because I use her a lot. And so thinking about it in that way is going to set yourself up to not be disappointed, because I see so many people every year that do a GSSR and they say they got shafted or they got somebody they didn't want or anything. And while that could still happen, you know, let's say you're fine with getting any of these people except for, I don't know, Kama. Let's say that because it's ludicrous because everybody pretty much likes Kama. But let's say she's the only one you don't want on this banner and you still get her. I mean, that's going to happen sometimes. But at the very least, you had a 4 out of 5 chance to get somebody that you were going to be content with. And maybe you really wanted MHX, and that was your big target. Like, well, I didn't get her, but I got Izumo, who I still really wanted. So make sure you're setting yourself up for success like that. Think about it in a way that you are putting your best foot forward, because ultimately, these gacha games exist to make money, and they're existing, you know, to make you want to summon for all these guys. At the very least, try to be a bit smarter than the company, right? I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm not trying to be condescending, but it's kind of what's the mindset you got to put yourself in, that you got to ultimately understand that they want your money at the end of the day, and you're giving it to them on this GSSR, so you might as well put your best foot forward and set yourself up for success the best way possible, right? Like, that's why for this one in particular, I'm pretty much happy with getting everybody. The only ones that I don't really want are like Benny Enma or NP2 Nero, but even if I do walk away with either one of them, I'll still be happy at the end of the day. I mean, I'm a huge Nero fan, so I'm at least kind of putting myself there being like, well, I could actually use Nero Bride at NP2 as like a DPS or something. That might be a little bit interesting. It gives me something new to do. And sometimes you might have to like trick yourself into coping and coping pretty hard, being like, well, you know, Sigurd's not that bad, I suppose. But unless you're exactly me and you really like Sigurd, you know, you're gonna have to kind of cope for yourself if you're gonna do this one. But sometimes, hey, that's what you gotta do, so you don't get super sad on your GSSR. But realistically, if you're asking me, hey man, ZTL, I am a new player, what are some of the best ones that you think I should hit? Well, for one, it's going to be either one of these support ones. In particular, it's going to be this one right here, because getting Castoria, who I will still to this day say, even 2 years looking ahead on JP, I could still say that she is the best singular unit in the game. What she does is ridiculous. You know, offering 100% to one ally is insane, but then 60% to everybody else, you know, people don't like to hear it, but that is the craziest thing for farming, right? It makes your arch loopers insane, but it also lets you do 90 plus and 90 plus nodes, and being able to set yourself up for that kind of success for something that is essentially like 90% of the game at the least, you do want to be there. That's a good position. Yes, you know, obviously there are CQs, there's advanced quests, there's boss fights and stuff along those lines, but that does not make up the majority of what you're going to be doing in this game. The majority of the time, you're going to be farming. You're going to be doing 3 turns, and you want to do that to, you know, not waste a whole bunch of time and have to sit there doing 7 turn clears, unless you particularly like doing that, but I'll still call you a little bit strange. But the other reason I say this one is also very strong is that even if you don't walk away with Castoria, I'm assuming most of you have picked Waver for your free 5-star, and getting Reigns is essentially getting your second copy of Waver, because she pretty much does the same thing. She's just more defensively oriented, right? Instead of giving crit damage, she gives that guy invincibility. She still gives attack, but then she also can mitigate class debuffs. And what I mean by that is, say you're bringing a Berserker, that Berserker now, because of her NP, will take neutral damage. Or if you're bringing, I don't know, like an Archer to fight a Lancer for some ungodly reason, that Archer will now take neutral damage against that Lancer. It's just a really strong servant to have. Obviously not ideal. You would have liked to got, you know, Castoria over here, but at least you essentially just got your second copy of Waver, which can not only be good for more CQ-oriented difficult fights, but it's also good if you're doing farming and you just need extra little bits of NP. If you need an extra bullet for your Chen Gong, you know, she's very good for that. But then the other servants are also very insane. Now, the only one that I'm going to say, and this kind of goes for both of these two, that is going to be a little hard for my newer players that are probably going to be hitting these, is going to be Van Gogh and Himiko over here. They could be a little bit of a learning curve to go for. Himiko, I think, is a bit easier because it is just essentially punch, punch, kick, kick the servant. Like, just do big buster crits, slam the enemy, and then just call it a day, right? She does like the overcharge mechanic, but realistically, you don't have to learn that super hard until, like, you know, you started getting into the game, and then you've started to learn what your servants have, or like good overcharge effects and stuff along those lines. You could pretty much just use her as like a big punch kick servant. Van Gogh is a little bit more complex because you have to kind of manage your curses, and your Van Gogh can game end herself with her own curses if you're not careful, which I know for a lot of people that have used Van Gogh, they're like, oh, that's ridiculous. You would never do that. But put yourself in the shoes of a new player. You might accidentally layer too many curses on your party and be like, this servant sucks. Like, I don't understand the appeal for them. They're just a bit of a harder servant to use because they're not really doing normal stuff, right? Like, she's kind of operating in a different way to most of your normal DPSs, because it's not even like a Super Orion or like a Coup Alter just kind of get buff and punch the enemy or just try to stall out the enemy for as long as possible. It's like managing things that you're told are bad, because you have to manage curses, which normally you don't want on any of your servants, but Van Gogh thrives off of it. So these could be a little rough for some newer players if you pull them, but if you take the time to learn what they do, they're also very, very rewarding. I also think these are very strong for newer players because you have both Qi Shi Huang over here, and you also have Super Orion, who are just phenomenal solo servants. I think learning how to do solos is very good for kind of getting newer players to learn the mechanics of the game, especially when we get stuff like Mighty Chains and stuff coming out. I've gone on record saying that I'm not the biggest fan of soloing. I like to do big damage. I like to just utterly blow up the bosses and stuff, but I do think it's a very good way to learn how the game kind of functions and everything, and then you kind of get into a more, I guess, a relaxed environment while playing. And so getting either one of these guys can be very helpful in that, because you get Super Orion, you learn how to kind of burst down bosses with your solo servant, and then Qi Shi Huang is all about like kind of sustaining himself and, you know, having good sustain throughout the entire fight, while also being able to do some like nice damage, because, you know, he'd stack his attack and stuff along those lines. So I think those are also very strong, but I'd recommend you go for this one because I just believe personally that walking away with either Reigns or Castoria is going to do more than walking away with Scotty and Merlin, even though they're both very, very strong. You know, it's just Castoria is too valuable. She's just too strong of a servant, and then having the kind of what would you say? The complimentary prize, I guess. That's not the word I'm thinking of. Consolation prize, that's what I'm thinking of. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart. But the consolation prize being Reigns over here is just very, very strong, right? It's a lot stronger than you're pulling for Merlin, and then your consolation prize is Scotty, who I do think is good. It's just, she's a lot harder to use than, say, someone like Castoria. I guess I haven't really talked about, like, say, Sherlock or Miss Crane. I think Miss Crane is really good, but every time I try to justify Miss Crane, everyone's like, I have to use my head to think. It's like, dude, she is not that hard to use. If you can use Summer Chloe, you can use Miss Crane. They're basically the same units. Just one does it on a skill, one does it on NP, and they both just give you a bunch of buffs. But it's like, come on, man. Like, you can figure it out. It's not that 5-head, but this is not the time or the place for that. And you guys know that Sherlock, I feel about him, he's like the best servant you'll never use, essentially. Like, he's really, really good if you want to do like FGO esports, but unless you're a long-time player or you're super sweaty, super try-hard, you're probably not going to engage in that. So these are probably some of the better ones, but I will not deny that going for the Koyanskaya one in particular is also not bad, because as I mentioned earlier, and the reason I used it for that example is that even if you don't get Koyanskaya, Arjuna Altar is crazy. You can just bring this guy to boss fights. You don't even have to use him as a farmer. The guts is enough to kind of keep him around long enough to just nuke the enemy with his NP. He just does crazy damage, and really, his damage is just contingent on the enemy being debuffed. You could bring Plug Suit and just get like the guaranteed stun, basically, and then get your extra damage. So you don't get the extra damage from the Buster Down if that happens to whiff, but you still at least get the power mod, quote unquote, from his first skill. So he's really insane. Hijikata is actually not all that bad. I think Hijikata is a lot better than people make him out to be. It's just not a Gouda waifu character, and he's always going on about like pickles and stuff in the event, so he's just kind of a crazy weirdo, which is why I think a lot of people are like, well, he's not like the most meta thing, and he's also just kind of bizarre. But if you get him, he is not bad. Like, you can definitely get some mileage out of him, especially if you want to, I don't know, do some memes with necromancy, right? If you don't know, you're a newer player, it basically gives you just a infinite guts, but it has a kind of like a lower chance to proc. But in theory, you have infinite guts, so you could do a lot of damage. Raiko's going to get very good in the future, though. She's already, I would say, decent you could still get some like pretty good usage out of her. But once she gets the battery, she just becomes super good. Same thing for Ilya over here. Like Ilya's just dummy nutty good. She does ridiculous damage, 50% battery. There's not much more you could ask for on this unit. And she has survivability and stuff on top of that. She's crazy. Cleopatra, if you get her Imperial Privilege to proc, is an insane unit. I think she's crazy when she gets that. But she is two different units. There's Cleopatra with and there's Cleopatra without Imperial Privilege. And the one without is very rough, let me just tell you that much. And then even Iskandar being on here, I think he's one of the worst units in the game, but that is with the caveat that they ever just give him, I don't know, a 30% battery or just extra support on some of his skills, like more damage, because his damage is already good. Like he hits like a single target unit on an AoE. It's just he can only do it once, but if they made his third skill, God forbid, 3 turns on both the Buster buff and the Star Gen, bro, I would kind of want this guy because he has like, what, a 10-hit NP or something along those lines? So he bombs a bunch of stars and then could just mow people down with crits on the follow-up. He would be a very fun servant to use in more difficult quests. He kind of just become like a 5-star rider version of Emiya, essentially, that can't swap his NP, but you get what I'm saying. So, you know, even if you pull Iskandar, you could just view that as more of like, I don't know, you're investing, right? It's like an investment for whenever he does get a buff and he becomes super crazy. Oberon, I think his banner is also pretty good. You know, I was talking earlier how people don't like Ruler Artoria. In all honesty, she's not like super crazy. I don't want to, you know, gaslight any of my newer players into thinking that she's crazy, but I do think she could do very strong crits. I think her NP damage is okay, could definitely be better, but not the worst servant you could pull, contrary to popular belief. If you pull Jalter, she's just a big beat stick. She just punches people really, really hard, and then she crits people really, really hard. She's just good. Like, she's kind of just standard .jpeg good unit. People would say she's probably missing a battery, but I think she's fine. You know, if you're bringing her to more difficult content, her passives are going to make sure that she's always just spamming her NP, because a slight gust of wind hits her and her passive skills say, oh, you know, someone hit you with a feather, here is 50% of your NP back. It's just ridiculous. Okita Alter also just keeps getting better. She kind of has the MHX syndrome over here, where they just keep giving her little buffs here and there, and she's just getting better and better. And I've used her as a Buster Looper, if you're curious about that, for those applications. She's also pretty good for that. As long as you're not running into any Knight class enemies, she'll be fine. And then obviously, you know, Oberon's the main prize. But then, like, Summer Abigail, yeah, she's definitely like one of the worst units in the game. She's not super strong, but at the least, she has a 50% battery. You could maybe use her for farming if you're really desperate. The sleep mechanic is interesting. It's not the craziest thing, but it's kind of a stun, so it could be worse, I guess. I don't know. That's a little bit of copium on me, but realistically, you have, like, I would say one really insane unit, then you have 2 very strong units, and then an okay unit and a little bit of copium on that one, right? So I do think these ones are actually pretty strong, and if you do get, say, Koyan Sky, she's a complete game changer for your account. Same thing for Oberon, because you can do, like, double Oberon setups and stuff as well. Although those typically do want you to have one Koyan Skya, but you could probably figure something out. I believe in you. I believe in your ability to to figure stuff out. But then from there, it's pretty much just good quality banners, right? Some of these are just kind of good. Like, I do think the Arts Offensive one, the reason it is the one I'm going for, is that even though I really want Summer Jean, I just think the quality of unit is very strong. I mean, Muramasa was my main arts farmer for the longest time on JP. I would bring him to farm against archer units, which I wish Twitch did not delete my VODs for that, because I could actually show that right now, because people would be like, oh, I don't believe that. But no, bro is crazy. When you just start stacking arts and NP damage and you have a 50% battery, you're just going to cook. You're going to be able to do very well. Now, don't bring him to like 90++, like Archer setups. He probably won't do very well on those, but against like your standard 333 nodes, I had no problems with him. You know, he's very, very strong. I think Nero Bride basically being a baby Castoria still probably has some usage if you need to do some weird setups where you're plug suiting in an extra, you know, kind of farming person. Although, I mean, she's going to be more of like support for like a farming setup, but she gives you that NP, that attack, that NP gain. She's just very, very strong for that. Benny Enma, I think, is a strong Arts DPS unit. She just does a lot of very good things. She has a couple of debuffs for the enemy, has some buffs that she does for the party that I think are neat. Has, I think it is double damage mod against chaotic and evil, and they're both split, they're separate. That I think is very strong. Shiki actually got a lot better on JP because they fixed how her NP worked, I believe. So she does not do the insta-kill before she actually gets her hits in. So in theory, if you wanted to get more NP gain from her, I believe you could, because she's now actually hitting them, is how it's now working. So that's good. She is one of those investment ones. Plus, I just like Shiki a lot. If I get Shiki, I'm a huge Kara no Kyokai fan, so I would love to just have that. It's a very cool servant for me to have. Squirtoria, even though I think her buff was not exactly what she needed, she's still very good at basically being the Archer version of Melusine, although I'd probably say a little bit worse, because, you know, go figure, the more modern unit has more bells and whistles going for her than the year 1 unit, but I still think she's very strong. Both of them is just Arch looping DPS. Jean is more of like a comfort pick for me. I just like Jean a lot. You know, oh dude, it's like Jalta's one of my favorite servants. Big shock that I also like normal Jean. And then even though I think these guys aren't the craziest, I still like them. I keep calling them like FGO's most wholesome couple. You know, I would love to have them. And you find that on a lot of these other gachas. Like this one I don't think is particularly strong. Like this one I'd probably avoid, because you do have Masashi, but the meta's kind of leaving her behind because she doesn't have a battery, which is a little unfortunate. Still very good in challenge quests where there are numerous enemies, because she has Pierce Invul. She has enough survivability to get the job done, but most people probably aren't going to be bringing their AoE. They're probably going to bring a single target, and if you're going to bring a single target, then you probably won't use her very much. Da Vinci I think is still strong, but I think she's stronger when you start getting higher NP copies of her. I tend to struggle a little bit with her damage, but that's just me. This is another one that I think is very high quality. Having both Summer Kama, Space Ishtar, Kiara, who I think is phenomenal. Summer Kiara, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but I don't know what it is. There's just something about, and I was talking about this on stream, there's something about Summer Kiara that I just don't like. And I'm not sure what it is, because every time I use her, she doesn't feel bad. Just something is off. I don't know what it is. And I've used her in CQ content, and I've used her in farming content. Something just doesn't feel particularly right. But again, she's still very solid. Hokusai and Yang. I think Yang is phenomenal. I think she's crazy. Hokusai is definitely like probably get an extra copy of her, but she's still strong. You know, if you want to bring her to more challenging content, being able to build up those. I think it's what, the first skill, or it's the third skill buff, the one that lets her build up on attack. In CQs, you can get more of those building up, and she starts to look more and more impressive. So yeah, I mean, from there, it's just kind of like, pick the one that you think is the strongest. I mean, even like this, I don't think this is particularly bad. Same thing for this one. I mean, the quality isn't as high as like, say this, I would say, but if you need a quick unit, you can walk away with a really strong one, especially this one. And then MHX, I want you to think about everything she has been buffed, so that's also like a Saint Court investment. I think that's what, 12 Saint Courts because of like all the interludes and rank ups, and if they're like 2 apiece. Although some of the interludes I don't think actually give Saint Court, so I might be a little wrong on that one, but I think she's like one of those like servants that you could just get like half a multi out of, because she just has so much content around her. And then it's really just looking at your box and seeing what else you need. Like if you're in dire need of a quick servant, you know, you can kind of look at, say, this and be like, okay, well, it's got like Dante's on it. I wouldn't mind getting an extra copy of him, because Dante's is one of those servants that if he is going to be your quick farmer, you want as many copies as possible, because he'll just get better and better, obviously, as your main farmer. And so you can get him as like a consolation, but you really want Tyra, then, I mean, you also get like Melt. You know, if you don't get Tyra as your single target, you could get Melt, and Melt's phenomenal. And, you know, if you wanted Dante's as an AoE, but you don't get him, but what, you get Domin, or Jax, or Voyager, or Karen, it's like, oh, boo-hoo, didn't get, you know, #1 guy, but I got like #2, 3, 4, 5 on here, like the other, some of the better quick AoEs in the game. That's not my real like take on how good they all are, right? So don't like look at your panties in a knot being like, what, Dante's isn't better than Domin. I'm just giving an example, right? These are just artificial rankings, but it's just like, oh yeah, they're all on here. Like all the really good quick AoEs are all here. So from there, I'm going to advise you to kind of look over these, find the one that has some of the servants you want, then start to compare and contrast. Okay, like you're like, oh, I really want Kama, but I also really want Summer Kama. Okay, which one am I going to be more happy summoning on? It's like, well, I want all 5 of these units, and on this one, I only want Kama. So it's like, probably go for this one, because you'll be more happy going for that one. There's less of a chance of you getting shafted. So I'll let you guys go into the Discord if you have further questions. I'll try to answer questions when I can, but if I'm not around or if I'm busy, we have other people in the FGO channel that definitely can help you out. Or if you do want me to just kind of go over it and give you like a live advice, again, I do that on my Twitch streams, and that'll be in the description down below. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know who you guys are going to go for. And if you remember, come back to this video and drop a comment and let me know if you got shafted or not, because that'll I think will be a very funny little experiment to see. It's like, oh dude, I really wanted Melusine. Post under that is like, I got Ryoma and I'm not very happy about it. But let me know all that in the comments down below, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace, late guys.